All right, it's my second time in Vilnius. Pleasure to be here once more. Thank you for inviting me back. People keep asking me, do you enjoy Vilnius? I was like, I wouldn't be here if I didn't enjoy it. So clearly I enjoy it. I'm not going to harp on too much about me and my background. You can read it on the screen. All I would love to emphasize is that for me, just like Martin was saying earlier this morning, it's not about agility. It's about the outcomes that agility brings. So for me, the key to agility is continuous improvement. The key to continuous improvement is retrospectives. At the heart of retrospectives are individuals and their interactions. And I aim to foster environments where people can have those interactions safely. Quick thing to get out of the way. I heard Martin swearing in his speech earlier, so I'm going to do the same. Thank you for setting that expectation. Fuck. Done. Okay. Second thing. I speak very quickly because I have ADHD and my brain goes 100 miles an hour, and I'm aware that that's difficult for non-English speakers to keep up with. So I need your help. If I'm speaking too quickly, give me a wave, do something, tell me, don't just sit there and struggle. Is that okay?
You can handle me.
I can, okay, I'll handle you, fine. Boom, okay, so let's start with a case study. I'm here to talk to you about continuous improvement and continuous improvement at scale. There are two teams in the same company. They are both working on software and they're working on AI because AI is so hot right now, of course. Now each team, they face the same problem. They failed. They had an issue with the API and the tokenization of it. Now Team Thor, they faced it in February and they spent weeks trying to resolve it. Team Hulk, the same issue in May, a few months later. Why? Why did Team Hulk face that same issue? What do you think? Silos? Didn't share? Yes, didn't share. So, there are a lot of barriers to learning and continuously improving at scale, and knowledge sharing simply isn't incentivized. We talk about lunch and learns and things like that, but then do we make the capacity in our sprints, if we're working in sprints, to intentionally share our knowledge? We're often too busy chasing the latest feature, and I know David Pereira talks about untrapping product teams, and Martin similarly helps you escape the feature factory, but we're often too busy chasing the next shiny thing. And what happens in Vegas? Stays in Vegas. Vegas, baby. So you're in a retrospective. Something goes wrong, you fuck up, the team makes a mistake. And you don't talk about it. You don't share that. Because we want to protect psychological safety. We want to make sure the team feels comfortable sharing things openly. But it results in us not learning at scale. People making the same mistakes over and over in different parts of the company. A very simple variation that will still maintain psychological safety is the Chatham House rule. You can see it on the screen there. It's essentially the same purpose. The only difference is that you remove any attribution to the individual, and therefore they can't be harmed as a consequence. So you're still protecting the team, but you're sharing those lessons, those failures, those mistakes. It is my fundamental belief that learning is one of our most powerful assets in a company. We're going to go for a whistle-stop tour across identifying, categorizing, measuring, and resolving systemic impediments. But I need to be honest about something as well. I made another mistake. I fucked up. So I thought this talk was an hour long. It's actually 45 minutes, which means we are going to have to choose where we use our time. This is a time box now, and you are going to help me. I need to know where we should focus. So if you would like to learn about systemic impediments, identifying them, imagine you are all a human barometer, right? So leaning really far to the left, that's systemic impediments, identifying them. Towards the middle, categorizing and prioritizing, and then all the way to the right, we're going to talk about resolving them. So I need you to physically move your bodies like this, so I know where you want me to start. Over to you. Lean in a direction. I'm going to look at you. For anyone following online, you're not going to be able to see this, but I think this is more towards categorizing. Okay. Now, the challenge, as I mentioned, is that information that we learn remains locally to the team. We think systemically, but we often act locally. The wins, the failures, the trends, the mistakes, the errors, they're all scars, they're all bruises, they're all things that can benefit other teams, and that learning is a powerful resource. So I'm going to help you explore ways that you can zoom out a little bit across teams of teams. Now, I love an experiment, folks. And I told you it's after lunch, we need some energy. So let's try this. This is a variation on a constellation exercise. A constellation exercise, you would typically move your body to indicate your agreement with a statement. But we're going to do it through sound, through voices. So the higher your pitch, ah, nice, right? The stronger your agreement with a statement. The lower your pitch, ah, the stronger you disagree with a statement. And we're going to start with a really easy one. So high pitch, strong agreement, I agree with the statement. Low pitch, oh, strong disagree. I'm singing karaoke later. Ah! Just me, right? Some of you are joining me. Yeah. All right. Continuous improvement is easy. Keep going, keep going. This is beautiful. I'm just enjoying myself watching you. All right. Okay, I know how to identify systemic impediments. We got that single, ah! Anyone else? No, we're done with this exercise. Move on, yeah? Last one. I have got tools to help me resolve impediments. There's a lot of low pitch here. Either the energy, the caffeine hasn't kicked in yet, or you're done. All right, fine, let's move on. We talked about, we need a brief detail about some of the words I'm talking about here. So you have local impediments, you have systemic impediments. Local impediments tend to affect a single team, a group of individuals, a smaller group. They are often easier to resolve. They take less time, energy, resources. These systemic ones, they tend to affect the teams of teams, the wider organization perhaps. Maybe whole functions like HR or finance need to be restructured to resolve them. And that makes them harder and more time consuming and more the sort of thing that leadership don't like to do because it's a lot of change. Let's look at some examples. So, a local impediment to a team might be that they lack a certain skill. A person, a capability isn't in that team. Maybe a UX developer. It could be a certain number of defects that affects that team only. Maybe they don't have a clear testing standard in that team. But systemic things could be governance, all of the paperwork and meetings that get in our way every day, or legacy infrastructure that holds us down, that stops us making progress. I couldn't talk to you about continuous improvement without alluding to some of the great concepts out there. So Kaizen, I'm certain you're all familiar with it, means change for the better. It's often used synonymously with continuous improvement. It comes from Toyota Production Systems. We have 3M, the 3 types of waste. I'm going to pronounce this wrong now. Mura, Muri, Muda. Some of them resulting to things not adding value, others due to inefficiencies, and others about just overburdening things, being beyond capacity. So another way to visualize the waste in the system is using 3M. We've got some really core principles that I want you to take away. And it's in the name. Continuous improvement, continuous. So why do we wait for retrospectives? Why do we harness all that knowledge and wait for months before sharing it? Every day, everyone, everywhere. It's a team sport. It's not just one person's responsibility to bring about. You will see some great wording there that links to many of the agile frameworks that you're probably using today, focusing on flow, knowing your customer and actually what they want. It doesn't matter how many products you build, how many features you churn out if none of them add value to your customers. Empowering people. If companies could get the people side of things right, they would do so much better. More focused on happy people over productivity and 100% capacity. Being transparent about our data. That data, again, I mentioned earlier, it's a learning, it's an asset. You can use that to foster the question. Given this information, what can we do, us against the problem? Our data's telling us this. We're going downhill. Not good. What do we want to do as a consequence? Not a blame thing. It's not you did this, Maria. It's not you. Us against the problem. and then going to the Gemba. Gemba means where the value is, so actually seeing where things happen. If that means you're working in manufacturing, go to the production line, see where they're building the products. If that means you're working in retail or in a gambling company, go to a casino and see people working and using the product on the ground so you can understand them, their why, the outcomes that they're receiving. Again, there is not a single customer out there, really, that cares about how many story points you've delivered. Does anyone care? Are you going to say, hey, you only delivered me 20 story points? You suck? No. You care about the way the product makes you feel, the way it makes your life easier, the way it helps you enjoy life. That's what customers care about, the outcomes, not the arbitrary metrics like story points. Moving on. We've got a classic PDCA cycle, obviously attributed to Deming. Quite simply, plan, do, check, adapt. This is what continuous improvement is. You have your starting point. You then plan what you're going to do, what the problem is. You then basically do the thing. I shared a fun LinkedIn post recently, and it was talking about the thing isn't doing the thing. Having a meeting about the thing isn't doing the thing. Writing a LinkedIn post about it isn't doing the thing. You sitting here listening to me today is not doing the thing. You're learning about it, but you've actually got to go and do it. So again, I encourage you after this bombardment of knowledge you're going to get over the next few days, and lots of great knowledge from lots of great speakers, do the thing. Put it into practice, and then learn from it. And this is where check and act come. You check how it works. You try something, you experiment, you learn how it works, you amplify the good things, and you do less of the bad things. And then it just continues to loop over. This is a visual that I love from Simon Powers' Adventures with Agile, and it's called the Enterprise Change Pattern. And I think it's a great way to visualize how you approach systemic issues. So it always begins with a why. Good old Simon Sinek, start with why. What is the reason we're trying to change? There's often something that moves us beyond inertia, like a burning platform. There's a reason, something compelling that says we need to change. And then you align leadership around that. You then think about who you're going to include. And when I say include, I'm talking about the people actually affected by the change. Because what we don't want to do is inflict change upon people. We want to invite them to be part of it. And then from there, you're seeing on the right this little cloud visual. It looks like a PDCA loop, right? You start with where you are. What's our current state? What's the data telling us? How are we feeling in our current reality? Define an experiment, make the change, measure it. And all of these things, you become reinforcing loops. They alter your structure and process, your culture over time. You start to embrace this experimentation mindset. You learn from what you're doing, and you continue round and round. Right, so that's a brief tour of continuous improvement. Question. Which techniques or data sources do you currently know for identifying impediments? Where are you finding them today? Throw some ideas at me. I need like a cricket noise. Has anyone got one? Retrospectives. Yeah, conversations from a retrospective. Daily syncs, yeah. Short feedback loop with the team. Problems emerge. Anything else? Dysfunction mapping. Michael Lloyd will love you. Good guy, by the way. Yes, dysfunction mapping, a great way. If you're not familiar with it, I encourage you to check out Michael Lloyd's created a technique called dysfunction mapping. Great way to visualize dysfunctions in the system and define hypotheses and experiments as to how you'll resolve them. Is he paying you? How much? Because I should speak to him. All right. So I'm going to introduce you to a few techniques. The pain avalanche. I love this one. You can use this anywhere. It could be a town hall. It could be a retrospective. It could be a scaled retrospective. We could probably do it right now if we wanted to. All you're asking is you've got this visual of like an avalanche, all the post-it notes cascading down the side of the mountain, causing pain. And you ask, hey, what's the biggest thing holding you back from succeeding or delivering value? Or what's the impact that had on the team? Or what's the one thing stopping us from achieving our highest priority? Now, you do that with hundreds of people. You're going to get a lot of information. A lot of information. And this data can be used to categorize it and identify where the systemic impediments lie. If you're seeing the same thing over and over, and for awareness, this was a live example. You can't really read the wording, But the common trend here was around priorities, and there being too many of them. And I'm seeing some nodding already, which means you've all faced this. Too many priorities, the tyranny of the urgent. Everything's a priority, and therefore nothing is a priority. So you've got the pain avalanche. You can use this as a way of just capturing things en masse. That could also be a survey. It could be a Slack message, whatever it may be. Just capture the pain in the system. Impediment bingo. Right, so you take all of those impediments from the previous exercise and you put them on a bingo grid. And again, you get everyone there and you say, hey, which of these are impacting you? And you can do that just at the team level, or you can do that at the individual level. And you're going to focus on the ones with the most. So focus on these: a lack of clear vision, changing priorities. Those were our systemic things. You could use little bingo balls for individuals. You could use teams, team icons representing the team names. And then what you'll start to spot is where there are common trends across teams. So this one here, constantly changing priorities. As I said, it was a theme. 4 teams were affected by this. Okay, sounds like there's something systemic there. And then if a team is affected by all the things, they really need some help. That's a big flashing beacon to leadership. Help us, please. We're struggling. So we can identify systemic impediments through a game of bingo. Health checks. Spotify health check, anyone? Yeah? If you're unfamiliar, they're a great way of visualizing, again, the impediments in the system. And what I love about them is that they are simple. You simply choose an area, delivering value, for example, when you ask the team, for you, is this red, amber, or green? Traffic light style. And is it getting better, upwards arrow? Is it staying the same sideways, or is it going down? And then once you've done that across all these areas, you're going to start to see some things like here. Easy to release is a problem for us, and being inclusive. That team was struggling with those things. Okay, let's design an experiment around how we can resolve that. We are now collectively aware of that problem. Let's do something about it. But then if you then scale that, that's a single team. Let's look at multiple teams. And you do this quarterly and say, right, okay, now I can see the system. So proactivity across several teams was a problem, and stress. And this was, again, real live data. I worked with a gambling company. They had 13 teams delivering in parallel across the globe. Stress was a major factor for them. And again, what I love about it is it exposes to leadership, hey, help, please. Do something. You are now aware of this. And if you aren't doing anything, that's a problem. One of the worst things I believe leadership can do is to ask for feedback from someone and then do nothing with it. So you ask a question, you put out a survey, and then you hear nothing. And it goes into a black hole, it disappears. And the next time a survey goes out, you go, oh, I didn't hear anything last time, I'm not going to bother. I don't care. I'm not going to submit. The first thing you should do when you ask for feedback is acknowledge it. Say, okay, we received it. This is what the data's telling us. And this is what we intend to do next. And this is when we're going to review next what's happened. So team health checks. And you can see on the screen here, there's various models of this. There's a great version by Martin Esterberg. It's got various areas, as I said, delivering value, fun, health of code base, etc., and a simple traffic light system. And that's how to use it. Really important, right at the bottom, not to be used to compare between teams. Because this is a self-rated thing. A team that says red doesn't mean that they are worse than a team that's amber for an area. It's their perspective. We're not using it to compare. We're using it to identify challenges in the system. The 8 wastes. Anyone familiar with the 8 wastes of software engineering? Mr. Dalmeen in the back. Okay. So Mary and Tom Popendick, they wrote a book called The 8 Wastes of Software Engineering, based upon Toyota Production Systems, adapted specifically for software. And you can see them here. You can't see them very well here. I can't see them very well here. Task switching, partially done work, unused talent, extra features, defects, handoffs, extra processing delays. You will make your people collectively aware as to what those terms mean. And then you'll have them share, using these little visual trash cans, which of these ones affect our teams. And then you can use that again to spot the problems. So here, extra processing had the most votes. Let's design an experiment to resolve that. Clearly, we're struggling with extra processing. Extra processing for awareness is all the extra meetings we have, all the things that we do that aren't delivering value or direct value to the client, which is often a lot of things. And you won't be able to see this there. The materials will be made available outside of this. I'm not going to harp on it about it too much, but the 8 ways is another great way of visualizing challenges. Very quickly, I've been told by the Lithuanian government that I need to include a break in this talk. So just for 2 minutes, just have a chat amongst you, your neighbors. It's a great opportunity to meet someone new and just talk about, the wastes currently affecting your companies. It's mandated. They're going to come in and tell you off if you don't do it. I'm serious. You don't have to if you don't want to. If you're feeling the post-lunch lull, you do you. But I encourage it. Hi. Okay, let's get back to it. Focus on me, please. I'm gonna do something brave. Last night, I really wanted to encourage my fellow speakers to continue drinking with me. There was a very strategic reason for this. I'm a far better presenter when I'm drunk, or hungover at least, because my mind moves slower, which means I don't speak as quickly, and all I will say is every single one of them let me down. Not a single one joined me for an extra drink. But I'm aware they're going to correct that tonight. There will be karaoke, I will be singing Barbie Girl, and I expect lots of you to do the same. Not the same song, but move on. Okay, let's talk about resolving impediments or understanding them and categorizing them. So, you see an octopus. I'm aware an octopus has 8 legs, not 10, but I just felt like it. This is a great way of understanding an impediment. It considers various lenses. So each leg, there's 10 of them rather than 8, each leg considers a new perspective around the impediment. So its nature, where does it come from? The reach, how far is it going across the company? Is it just one team or a couple of teams, or is it everyone? The impact it's having, what's the consequence? The span of control, can we do anything about it? The goals behind it. What are we trying to achieve, or what could we achieve from it? The fact that there are opportunities in impediments. We can spin that around and turn it into an opportunity to do something. You can turn a negative into a positive. The consequences, the real impact, what's it actually going to mean? The people, how is it affecting the people? Which teams are shielded from it? Number 10, because that's a great way of identifying a way to improve. Which teams aren't affected by this, and why? And then what can we learn from similar impediments that might help us? So again, there's more details here. These questions you can use to break down an impediment, to understand it further, and that helps you be better prepared to resolve it. A bit like understanding the problem first helps you, know your enemy. I've just walked through these, but again, in the materials later for when you need them. The spheres of control. I love this exercise. So you put a big visual on a wall or a virtual whiteboard, and you put your impediment in the top left-hand corner, and you say, hey folks, where is this for you? Move an X to demonstrate, is it inside your control, something that you can directly do anything about? Is it something that's in your influence? Maybe it's another team or a colleague. You can say, hey, we're stuck with this, help please. Or is it genuinely nothing you can do anything about? Legislation, company-wide change. And the funny thing is, often people will put it in the everything else column. They'll say, hey, it's not anything we can do. You hear, we were talking about stand-ups or daily syncs and retrospectives. What happens is someone shares something and it gets escalated upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards, saying, help please, help please, help please. But fundamentally, I believe that no matter how big the impediment, no matter how challenging it is, there is always something you can do about it. And when you visualize it in this way, you can then begin to probe further. So the things that are sitting in the everything else column often mean they need further support from leadership. The things that are in our influence, we may wish to co-create an experiment with that team, that group, that department to try and resolve the impediment. Again, co-creation. If it's inside your control, you don't have to worry. You've got it. Your team can do that autonomously. And a really good question from leadership here is, hey, what steps could we take to move this closer to being in your control, to move the decision closer to the teams? So yeah, give that a go. We've got a standard effort value matrix. This is a good way to prioritize them. I've got a little spin on it. So you want to avoid the currency chasm, the bottom right-hand corner, avoid them like the plague. If you basically put a bunch of impediments on this, and if it sits in terms of their low value but high effort, that's going to be a huge waste of money. It's going to sap up all your time and energy. The top right-hand corner, rolling the dice. Literally got a dice in my pocket. I forgot about that. Yeah, rolling the dice. Those are your gambles, those are your bets, and they might come off, they might pay off because they could deliver a lot of value, but also they're going to be high effort. The ones we want to focus on are the two on the left-hand side. The Lightning McQueens, if you've seen Cars, the movie, Lightning McQueens, and marginal gains, the small things, the things that are low effort and high value. And we're going to talk about that momentarily. In fact, I'm going to do it now. There is a great story from Sky Cycling, marginal gains. Sky Cycling and British cycling in the early 2000s were pretty much irrelevant on a global scale. They'd never won a Tour de France. They'd never won anything. No, I think they won one medal at the Olympics. And then David Brailsford came in, the new sporting director. And rather than focusing on changing everything, the big changes that we often see, the big bang ones, he said, hey, I want to make marginal gains. A 1% improvement in this and this and this. A 1% improvement in the weight of the tire on the bike. A 1% improvement in the way we recover after a training session. A 1% improvement in the massage gels that we use. All of these little things aggregate to big results. And again, that's a huge mindset thing that I encourage teams and companies to adopt. A little bit further forward, I've got a technique called the marginal gains gauntlet, which, similar to the previous one, has a series of questions that you break something down into smaller chunks. If you're a Miro fan, and you've got all this data on your screen, it can be really great to do an affinity map. You've got a lot of data, you need to make sense of it. Affinity mapping, and there's a great tool called Clusterizer, which does it automatically. It will produce a visual a bit like this, and all I've done is I've tagged, or co-tagged, invited people to tag a number of insights from the pain avalanche or other exercises with people, process, system, in control, outside of control, etc. And then it just basically categorizes them like this. And you can say, okay, great, so there's lots of things around people, but that's also connected to process. And again, it's just a way of moving closer to understanding insights and decisions. Miro also has some AI now, because everything has. And you can very quickly summarize large volumes of data. You can see at the top there, I've clustered a bunch of Post-its together. You can press summarize, you can press cluster by keywords, and you can cluster by sentiment as well, which does feel a little bit bad, big brother. But just showing positive, negative can be a useful way of visualizing and planning what to do next. Okay, so let's talk data. Chuck some data at me. How do we measure improvement? What are the metrics? Health checks, yes, it's a good one. Velocity, okay. That's all I'm going to say. But thank you for sharing. Anything else? Cycle time, love that one. Going back to probabilistic forecasting and providing forecasts rather than estimates. Okay, lots of examples. Team health, throughput, staff turnover, et cetera, et cetera. There is no one single perfect metric. They are all contextual. It all depends on your situation, your goals, your culture. And to me, metrics are a compass. They are not to be used in isolation, but each of them provide you a data point. Those data points allow you to alter your trajectory, alter your future in pursuit of your goals. There's a great resource by Powell Hurin. It's like the ultimate product metrics, and I encourage you to check out that for more on metrics. Marginal gains gauntlet, mentioned that. So you start with your impediment at the beginning of the gauntlet, so cycling on that route, and you're looking at various areas relating to that. How can we streamline? How can we save a few minutes each day? These 1% improvements. What's a 1% improvement in the tooling we use that can save us time? What's the simplest next step we could take? What's the controlled experiment? Where could we pilot this in a small area so that we limit the exposure and the cost and the risk? And again, what's our prior learning? What can we learn from our previous experiences, either as our team or other teams, that might help us move forwards? There's all the questions. Again, not going to read through them one by one, but they are there. If you want to take a photo, I'll pause. Got it? Yeah. Impediment cyclone. This is my favorite way of resolving an impediment because it's collaborative. And I actually encourage using this as an alternative to lean coffees as well. And I'll tell you why. Lean coffee is pretty much one of the predominant ways that we have conversations in group settings these days. They're at conferences everywhere. However, it's a time box. We're going to talk about this topic for 8 minutes, and we've prioritized that topic. So we've had a democratic input into the topic. And then maybe 2 or 3 people speak, and everyone sits aside waiting for their turn. And their time box runs out, and you don't get to share your input. And therefore, you're not as included, and you don't get to speak out, and you maybe sit there because you don't want to interrupt. So this is an alternative. And what it does is it takes your impediment in the beginning or your conversation topic. You are still going to prioritize them as a group, so you'll have the ability to influence where we start. And then you basically go around this cycle, exploring how you might resolve it. And it begins with, hey, what's something I wish I knew about this earlier? What's something I maybe have just learned that would have been useful for someone else? So we're starting to unlock the things that others may not already know about this. Then you go around and say, hey, this is a way I've dealt with this before. It might be in a previous company, a previous team. This is a way it's worked. So again, we've got too many priorities for that section. You've got limit work in progress. You've got throwing a tantrum. That's genuinely what someone said. If it works, it works. The bottom right-hand corner is, what ideas do I have? Blue sky thinking. What have I not yet tried? What have I seen? What have I heard? What could we do? And the last one, my favorite of all, leverages improv. Whose line is it anyway? Anyone a fan of that show? No. You're all heathens. That's all I can say. No. That's your homework. If there's one thing I want you to take away, go and watch that show. I jest. In Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's an improv show, and one of the fundamental principles of improv is you accept someone's idea. You say yes and. So when someone starts a topic, I'm going to go into a coffee shop, the other person accepts that they're in a coffee shop and builds upon that idea. And the same is true of this exercise. You have looked at various lenses here, and you've got to the 4th one, and you're going to improv. You're just going to grab someone else's idea and build upon it. Yes, and let's do this. Yes, and let's do that. So in this context, prioritize backlog. Yes, great, and we're going to limit a work in progress of 2. Nice. So we're building on someone's idea, and we begin to create a culture of building on other ideas, accepting their ideas, which can also have the impact of helping people feel more comfortable speaking out openly. Told you how to use it already. And then how do we resolve these impediments? Well, you design experiments. And I've got a couple of canvases. All of these freely accessible, by the way, at the end of the session, if you provide feedback. If you provide feedback, you'll get 105 free templates. This is an experiment canvas, and it basically walks through various things you can consider around designing a good experiment. Okay, the scientists are the people involved. Who's carrying out the experiment? The problem, what are we actually trying to achieve? The outcome, what are we hoping will happen? The results, what's the data we might start to see? The hypothesis, if we do X and this happens, then something. So we start to think of it in terms of hypotheses. And of course, the litmus test, the actual data we'll see, the metrics that will tell us we're on the right track, the people we need to involve, and the trials. When are we going to start the experiment? How long is it going to be? And there's an even simpler version called the Lean Experiment Canvas. Problem, outcome, results, trials. Boom. So use that to co-create experiments with those involved. OK, so I've actually gone through this pretty rapidly. And that means we've got time for a recap and potentially questions so that I can get my ass off stage and allow Anthony Savalas to come up and present. So 5 things I would love you to remember outside of today. Continuous improvement is continuous. I mentioned this. Don't wait for a retrospective. If you need to, build in questions into your daily sync that say, hey, how do we need to improve today? What could we do better today? Every meeting should have a feedback loop in that gauges, is it a valuable use of our time? Amplify the good things, dampen the bad, and pivot where needed. Am I good? Yeah, just checking. Start small, so break those big things down into small chunks. This is agile, you know this, and you've got the marginal gains gauntlet as a way of doing so. Co-creating change with those involved rather than inflicting it upon them is so fundamental to me to reduce resistance to change. It's their way of working. I've always hated the idea of someone telling me what to do. And it's true of others as well. Everything is an experiment. What I've done on the stage today has been a bit of an experiment. If anyone's seen some ducks around, that might be an experiment too. If you know, you know. And lastly, make improvement a priority. It can't just be a side-of-desk thing. You can't do a retrospective and then the actions disappear into the ether. You've got to make time for this. You've got to build in a buffer for it. Otherwise, it won't get done, and you'll be complaining about the same things in a few weeks' time anyway, and that builds frustration and resentment. So make time for continuous improvement. Build it into your DNA as a team and a company. Feedback, as I said. If you do this feedback, scan the QR code there and provide feedback, you will get 110 free templates in a single download that you can use today. So instant access to tools that you can use inside Miro, Mural, pretty much any whiteboard you can think of that will save you a lot of time. And they're free, and the code is DUCK. Again, if you know, you know. I'll wait just a moment for you to scan that. I got you smiling. And voila, also more links. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, you can do so. There's lots of people that do. There's my website where you can download lots more things and other insights. I've got a podcast, a YouTube channel, a Slack community, and all sorts. And yeah, the top right-hand QR code is just all the links. So if you scan that, you'll just have easy access to all of them. And that's me done, folks. So question me. Grill me. What have you got? I keep reminding myself I need to be back over here. There we go.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, so you talked about how there's a difference between localized problem solving and like how this will scale across businesses, and you gave some examples. How do you actually incentivize for people to engage with this? Because we typically don't embrace finding problems, we embrace finding solutions, right? That seems to be the mantra. Any thoughts on how to help shift the incentivization imbalance?
My first instant thought to that question was to demonstrate how easy it is to think of the negative first. Okay? So we, as humans, have an innate negativity bias. If you go on a web page, you will spot all the problems on a web page. If you've had a bad experience, you'll remember the bad experience more than the positive ones. So it's natural, it's human, and we can leverage that to our advantage. A great technique I love is the world's worst retrospective, or just the world's worst format. And rather than asking, hey, how can we improve? You say, hey, how can we make this worse? How can we make our customers hate us? How can we make our customers stop using our product? How can we reduce the morale on the team? How could I deliver the worst talk ever at this conference? Tell me, how could I do that? You've probably got some ideas in your mind instantly. Well, he could speak in a really slow, boring tone, and he could not have any good visuals behind him, and he could be all over the place. It's easier to remember the negatives, so demonstrate that with the teams, and then flip them around. Use that to explore the positives.
Any other questions?
Juan.
Hi, and thanks for the presentation. My question is about scaling, actually. Tons of useful instruments for sure. Any advice on how engage teams on a scale to collaborate using one of those?
How to get teams at scale to collaborate. Pose it as an experiment. Say, hey, at the moment, I observe that X. I observe that we aren't learning as much as we could. Or I observe that we're facing this. Show them data if you need to. This team struggle with this team struggle with this. This is a problem. Why don't we try something new? My proposal is, why don't we try this method and see how it goes? And then you're empowering them to say yes or no. And maybe you just say, hey, let's try it once and just see what happens. If you pose something as an experiment rather than a fixed new way of working, it's much easier to bring about change. And then if it works, great, do more of it. If it doesn't, maybe pivot to something else. There's lots of techniques.
Okay, and the second one, if no one minds.
Does anyone mind? No, you got this.
Great auditor. Nice. Thank you, guys. The question is, does everything that happens on the retrospective or meetings like this stays there?
No, it doesn't, honestly.
The process or just the results? Because sometimes teams a bit stiff and hesitant in sharing the process like things, and they are very open in sharing the results. But what would be your advice? Working with them, like
would be to begin with destigmatizing failure. So I often talk on stage about a thing called a fuck-up fest, a failure party, where you make mistakes and you admit your mistakes and everyone celebrates them. And we can do it now if you like. I can say, right, I fucked up today by forgetting that it was 45 minutes rather than an hour. I went on stage with my flies open once and someone pointed it out at the end of the session. And then I said, well, thank you. I've just been talking about failure and you didn't tell me. And he said, I thought it was a feature, not a bug. And I was like, yes, love that response. But no, I made a mistake and now I feel, no. You can destigmatize failure. You can encourage people to, or help people realize that it's okay to make mistakes. It's natural. I am here today because of a lot of mistakes. No one makes it perfect the first time. Michael Jordan shot so many thousands of shots and everyone focuses on the wins, but he lost like 30 games on the final shot. But no one talks about that because we're afraid of it. So the more you talk about it, the more comfortable you get with it. And then you start to emphasize the fact it's a learning opportunity rather than failure. And then when you do that, you start to breed an environment where people celebrate their failures. We say, you failed. Celebrate, laugh, great. And it becomes a fun thing and you award the best failure. You get a trophy because you fucked up hardest. Good work. And then you begin to erode that fear. There's another technique called fear setting by Tim Ferriss, where you explore in various steps how you can reduce the chance of that thing you think is going to happen from actually happening. Because the problem is we torture ourselves so much in our heads about things that may never come to fruition. So fear setting is another exercise you can use.
Can you repeat again, fear settings by?
Fear setting by Tim Ferriss. There is a Mirrorverse template for it.
Thank you so much.